Okay, so the topic of today's lecture is working with clients in the biomedical engineering design course, and I am Professor Bill Murphy in biomedical engineering. Just a brief background on me. My graduate degree is in biomedical engineering from Michigan, and my postdoc is in chemistry from Chicago, University of Chicago, and I arrived at UW in fall of 2004, and I've been involved in the design course essentially since then. My research interests are primarily in biomaterials and stem cell work, including tissue engineering related work. So if you, as a design student, need help in those areas, I'm a person that you can contact. So getting back to the topic of today, I'll start out just by talking a little bit about clients, what their characteristics are, what their priorities are, because as a student in BME design, one of the first lessons of interacting with clients is understanding the client that you're working with. First off, it's important to understand that the client is interested in the design idea, but they typically don't have expertise in engineering. And that's in large part why they're so interested in working with you as design students. So their solution to the design problem that they've defined is oftentimes not specified, and they don't have the background to specify the solution to the problem, which is in large part what makes the design problem exciting for you to work on and makes them interested in working with you. So they really need your creativity, your expertise, and your capabilities. And you typically must help define the design solution and to some extent the design problem in conjunction with your client. A second characteristic is that the design project is typically not at the top of the client's priority list. The client has to be engaged in the project, and part of your job is engaging the client in the project. You want them to you want them to think of this project as being very important to their work. And communication with the client early and often is key to maintaining their engagement in the project so that it doesn't fall off their priority list. A third characteristic is that the client interest tends to be directly proportional to the student initiative. So the more you accomplish, the more you push the client to become involved in the project. So thoughtful professional interaction with the client often leads to thoughtful professional responses from the client. So if you want the client to interact with you in a way that puts this again at the top of their priority list, the best way to do that is to show a great deal of initiative, creativity, and capability early in the project. Now that we've gone through the client characteristics, I'd like to now go through what your priorities should be as a design team interacting with the client. So the first, as I mentioned already or alluded to, is to engage the client with your creativity, your enthusiasm, your persistence, and your progress on the project. If the client is impressed, they're more likely to be involved and give you the resources you need to complete a really great prototype. You have to make it clear to the client that the project is important to you, that this project is very important to your undergraduate experience so that they'll be fully engaged. Communicate early and often with the client, so you should be setting up weekly or bi-weekly meetings with the client. And more importantly, you should be preparing diligently for those meetings. So you should have a list of questions and concerns for the client prepared. Those lists of questions and concerns should go to the client with ample time for the client to consider those questions and concerns and really think about how they can help you in the design process. And then when you meet with the client, you can then go through those as sort of a bulleted list rather than going to the client and saying, we're confused, without having a lot of specificity to it. So I think you want to set a tone of professionalism and in some cases seriousness or urgency in your contacts with a client. You want your email messages to the client to be appropriately titled, lists of questions and concerns to be adequately considered and thought out, etc. The other thing you want to do that's very important and that very good design teams do well is to ask probing questions early in the semester. And that oftentimes avoids confusion or delays later in the semester in your interactions with the client. So it's important to note that the client isn't being graded. You're being graded. So your understanding of the problem is much more important than the client's understanding of the problem. So don't be too concerned about offending the client with difficult questions if the questions are posed professionally. It's important for you to ask the difficult questions early, even if they are uncomfortable for the client to answer, if they're very difficult but important questions related to the design problem. Another note is that you need to understand the rationale behind all of the design decisions in the semester. So you should remember that you're engineers, you're not technicians for hire. Your interaction with the client should be one of collaboration, not one of you essentially doing what the client tells you to do. So these should be your priorities in interacting with the client. Some tips in communicating with the client, some things that you might want to keep in mind during your communication. One is to first off determine who is the appropriate person to contact for specific design needs. It's not always going to be one person, and it's not always going to be the client that was listed in the original design description. So it may instead be another member of the client's lab or department. It's important to determine who that is early on in the semester. Interactions with the client should always be professional, so in each meeting make it clear what you want to accomplish and what you need to learn and or obtain from the client. The client isn't going to know these things, so you have to really define and actually really manage the meetings with the client. This is an important experience to learn about what you'll ultimately be doing if you take a job in industry, for example. And telling the client something broad like, I'm confused about the project, rather than something specific, doesn't initiate a very productive conversation. What initiates a productive conversation is saying, I don't understand specifically how you want us to define this parameter in the design, or how what you want to accomplish with this component in the design. And then the client can thoughtfully respond to that if they're given enough time to consider it. The next point is to give the client an opportunity to respond thoughtfully to your concerns. So what I would recommend doing is assemble lists of thoughtful, specific questions or concerns as a team and send them to your client via email, for example, prior to meeting with them. Give them at least a few days to consider your concerns so that then when you meet with them, they've had a chance to think about what your concerns are. What this avoids is delays of weeks. So if you meet with your client once every week, you might come with them with a concern one day or a question one day. They may not have adequate time to think about it until the following week, so you don't get your answer until a week later. If you have the concern voiced to your client earlier on, then you get an answer faster and it speeds things up. As I mentioned, ask probing questions early in the semester. So communication early is key, and that's another part of engaging the client in the process. Dealing with client-related concerns. So there's a series of questions that often design teams have as the semester goes on, and there are some really common concerns that come up. First is a question that a team might ask. My client does not respond when I try to contact them. They're difficult to get into contact with. The first suggestion I would have is try a different form of communication. If email doesn't work well, try a phone call. If a phone call doesn't work well, try a personal visit. Indicate in your communications with the client in a clear and professional manner that it's very important that you get in contact with them, and indicate that you understand the client is busy, and ask the client whether there is someone more accessible in their lab or office that you can interact with. So finding someone who's going to be your point person is key. A second question would be, my client does not have a clearly defined design problem and solution. And this is a very common concern with clients as the semester goes on. But in large part, it's your responsibility to help define the design problem and particularly the design solution in conjunction with the client. So you should be creative and resourceful, and again, ask difficult questions to your client as the semester goes on. Another that comes up really later in the semester is, my client and I disagree on which design solution is best. And if that's the case, then the key initially is to understand why you disagree with the client. Why is it that you want to go one way and the client wants to go the other way? What are their specific reasonings for going in one direction rather than your direction? And in general, you should not create a design in a specific way just because the client says so. So this is not, again, you're not a technician, you're an engineer. It should be a conversation between you and the client which direction to head in with a design. So it's important to understand their rationale behind design decisions and your rationale behind design decisions, and then start the conversation that way with the client. You're certainly not required to do things the way the client tells you to, but you have to have clear rationale for why you want to do them differently. On slide 6 in the presentation that you'll have in conjunction with this talk, I list a series of initial questions for clients. So early in the semester, as you know, as design students, you're required to meet with the client early on and establish your relationship with the client. And in that initial meeting with the client, oftentimes you're introducing yourselves, you're getting contact information from the client, but it's important for that initial meeting to be productive because again, if it's not, then you push the start of your design project back 2 weeks, 3 weeks, etc. So there are some questions you can ask that really will speed things up early on. The first is, who should we meet with as a design team periodically through the semester to discuss design progress and questions or concerns? Should it be the client or is there an assistant in the lab or office that's more appropriate for us to be meeting with? The second is, what is the contact information and the preferred mode of contact, for example, email, phone, personal visit, for people of relevance to the design project? When is an optimal time to meet periodically to discuss design progress and questions and concerns? If you can delineate a time that's going to work throughout the semester on the first day of interacting with your client, you're much better off. What's the preferred protocol for ordering supplies and equipment relevant to the design project? Is there a specific person in your lab or department who handles ordering? And if so, what is their contact information and preferred mode of contact? You're going to need supplies and equipment as the semester goes on. Very important to determine who's going to be helping you with that. And the fifth question is, can you direct us toward an appropriate introductory set of reading materials related to the design problem? So would you recommend a particular order of importance in the introductory reading? How can we get started very quickly in understanding the design problem? And finally, are there resources that we will need during the semester that require training or perhaps special access privileges? Do you need a key to get into a certain room or building? Do you need training to work on a particular type of instrument? If so, how can we get started quickly to ensure that we have proper training and access to needed resources? So that list of questions will help you get started with the client and hopefully will speed things up early in the semester. The likelihood is that toward the end of the semester, you're still going to be scrambling to try to finish things up. That's always the case. But if you get started early, your prototype will be closer to complete than it would be otherwise. So hopefully this information will be helpful as you go through your design experience.